What's up YouTube? Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Memento and how if it's still like viable after Justice Hunters and the potential ban list. So first of all, I don't think Memento's gonna be on ban list, just like the last times. And in general, you can still play Memento. Okay, now for the details. So first of all, without the ban list, there are still Malice and Mitsurugi around. Malice is still a tough matchup, and Mitsurugi is handleable, but not great. For the Justice Hunters matchups, you first of all have Dracotail, K9, mostly K9 Vanquish Soul or K9 Crystron, and the Yami. So, due to Yami being kinda bad into breakers in general, this deck probably has a good time because it mostly plays breakers. Like in this build, as you can see, Book of Eclipse, Droplets, and Super Poly. I'll talk about the list in general like later. And K9 Vanquish Soul is a little bit more rough with breakers, just because Super Poly doesn't do anything. Book of Eclipse is good, but not enough, and Droplets is okay as well, but the idea of Droplet is that it's mostly there to stop turn 0 plays, like versus Dracotail at turn 0, Arthurian, a 5 mana, not 5 mana, a Holy Sue, or a Izuna. So that's the main reason for me to play Droplet. Oh, by the way, this is wrong. Talent should be in the main deck and Coldby in the side. So for the matchups, I think Dracotail is probably fine. Like Super Poly isn't like a turn skip or like a game winning factor, but it's good because it stops one Arthelion and it gets rid of the Gulamel on end board. So it does at least something. Yeah, this matchup, because Dracotail being a mid-range deck, mid-range decks for Memento in general were always pretty good because this deck is very good into boards, and if your board is like not that much of interrupts, it's pretty rough. Also, this deck has a lot of ways to dodge, like the Horn trap to bounce, because you got Book of Eclipse, Droplet, Breakout, Bone Party, Fusion, Super Poly. You have so many ways to dodge it, and the spell, yeah, you just need to like draw Droplet at this point to like dodge it. But in this deck, you have so many power spells. Like one spell negate mostly shouldn't be like enough to stop your whole turn, except if you like get handtrapped 2 or 3 times in the process, which can happen because people play the Cartesia build with 15 handtraps. But in general, I think Dracotail is fine. You can definitely beat it, especially going second and going first. It can be rough because the Dracotail deck also plays very hard, very good into boards. And without Herald on end board, it can get rough. I think if you wanna like leave your board or try to protect your board, you need Herald, and maybe like a Droplet or Super Poly set to like 100% be like confident that your opponent will not break your board, but because you need at least to negate one spell. And the problem is, if they get access to the spell again, they can use it again because Herald negates activation. So in theory, if you want, you could send Dracotail first with Memento. It works, but it's a gamble. If you brick, then you'll just lose. Or if you just draw Engine and then not that great Engine, of course, you can't do anything then. Okay, for Yami, as I said, breakers are good against Yami, and I know the reason to not play breakers is, yeah, you broke the board with 1 or 2 breakers or 3. You still got 3 cards in hand, and your opponent, the board is gone, but there's still like handtraps in the hand. It was the same before in Rise Mitsu, like they had full board and 2 to 3 handtraps in hand because this is a 1-card combo deck that starts with 5 cards and can draw a card of Cross. You could draw a card of Daigusto Emerald. You could draw cards of Dugaris. So it was the same before, if not even worse. Malice also draws 3 cards in a combo, so you had to beat the board and handtraps. And Impulse is a very bad handtrap a very good handtrap into Memento. So it's rough, and it was possible. So why shouldn't it be possible right now? Even considering that Yami is way like it's very very bad into breakers. Even more bad than like the other decks we played against before, so it's definitely possible. And for Vanquish Soul K9, as I said, Book of Eclipse and Droplet are fine, and Super Poly. In the future, we will get the Axon monster in Doom of Dimensions, which is this one, who is a good Super Poly target because you can fuse off any Synchro or Link, which could be Rock, it could be Ripper, it could be the Werewolf if he's already on field, plus Holy Sue or Valon. And it also still does something. So, for example, your opponent ends on Holy Sue, Ripper, and some other stuff. You start with Super Poly, fuse them away, and if your opponent in your turn uses the Lupus to XC summon, if the Lupus is Chain Link 1, you can negate the summon because this negates inherent summons. Yes, I know, Lupus activates, so theoretically it couldn't work, but it works because Lupus just says XC summon, and XC summon is an inherent summon. So this works, so it's not that bad even after you fusion you fused him. And yeah, that's for the matchups. In general, if you think about the matchups, Vanquish Soul is still pretty hard, even if you have Board Breakers, and even if this card comes out, it's still hard because the Trap can hurt, because the Trap and Madlove, Raisin, okay, Raisin you can dodge, but Madlove Bounce, Holy Sue Steel, Caesar Pop, they're all non-target, and you can't dodge non-target interrupts. Like your normal Blade, activate Blade, and your opponent uses Caesar to pop. You chain, breakout, summon Goblin, and then your opponent just pops Goblin. So you can't dodge non-target interrupts, which pretty hurts. That's for me why Vanquish Soul is a kind of hard matchup. It's not 100% unwinnable, but it's from the three Justice Hunters deck, it's definitely the worst matchup. By the way, before you say anything about the side deck, it's just theory, what I approached in the testing games. Okay, so after I talked about matchup, I don't think I need to explain the Raizi Mitsu and the Malice matchup. I know Book of Eclipse is bad into Malice, but it's good versus the rest. And Super Poly is bad into Raizel Mitsurugi, but it's good against Malice, Draco Tail, Yami. It's very, very decent. And yeah, so for the deck list, it's almost the same I played at Nats. Engine-wise, it's one-on-one the same. Also the Prosperity. But at Nats, this was 3 Perulia, and this was 1-for-1. And one of those were gone for... I'm not sure about my Nats list, but it's just 3 Anguish, 3 Darkblade, 3 Tatsu for consistency. I was even thinking about playing a second Sleepy over a Darkblade, or over anything else, just for consistency. Also, Sleepy theoretically is a good extender into boards, Detonator is still a card, and Sleepy is there a good extender. Vanquish Soul pops a lot of your cards with the Field Spell and the, not the Field Spell, with the Trap and the Caesar. But versus Yami, Sleepy is probably never gonna come up. As an extender, because your opponent pops something of you. That's what I'm... Okay, the one Field Spell can pop a card, sure. But I think versus Yami you're generally fine. The only problem versus Yami obviously is Herald, so that's why those cards are all here. But in the beginning I wanted to just leave it like this, and play with it. Still 2 Goblin because the quick spell. If you draw 1 and you only play 1 and you have this card in your hand, it's just dead. So you don't want to do this. The mandatory cards, you can cut Horned. I tested without Horned. Sometimes I missed it because of Herald plus SP. But you don't need to play Herald. It's just preference if you want it or you don't want it. For the extra deck, it's pretty standard. 2 Creation King, you need 1 theoretically for the combo, but if you don't play Baphomet, you need 2. 1 Twin Dragon, you could go up, but then you need to cut something else, and everything in here has a reason. Draco's Apelia and Guardian Camera are your go-to fusion monsters with fusion. Those are the Super Poly targets. I wanted to keep this in because versus Draco Tail there is not a better fusion Super Poly target, because this one removes bodies and stops the Arthelion, the first Arthelion they summon. Because if you summon this in defense, the only way how they can remove it is like fusion summon. And if they fusion summon a Caesar, oh my god, Arthelion, you cannot out it. And only if you like then use Pan or Mululu as fusion material, but the Arthelion then doesn't trigger, and that's pretty good for you. So that's the reason behind this card. Also, if you summon it, you can use the effect because you play dragons and spellcasters. Herald, as I explained, it's very good. I think versus Vanquish Soul is ass because they don't play that many spells. If you have the capabilities in your hand to go SP plus Herald, like if you're uninterrupted, still go for it because of cards like Stake Your Soul in the field spell, so you can still negate it. Or for the K9 engine like Chaotic Elements or Case of K9, so that you can stop one of the spells, because without this card you cannot interact with spell traps. Then Dark and Luna are just for access code line. In the beginning I was like, okay, Luna is better right now, I think, but I was just gonna be honest, I was just putting in both, because in Vanquish Soul Cannon you don't have lights, but in Yami you don't have dark, so that's the reason why I play both. Celine for access code, obviously access code because you need an access code line to OTK, and Goddess is for Lunalight, not because of the performance at Worlds. I was keeping it in like since Duelist Advance, just because your Lunalight matchup without this card is unwinnable. And I'm talking like unwinnable. The only way you win without this card versus Lunalight is your opponent doesn't know your deck. Because if your opponent knows the deck, there's no reason to use the Raigeki effect until the battle phase, because you cannot out towers in Memento without attacking. So that's why you play Goddess, to force them to use a Raigeki when you have 4 bodies. And getting 4 bodies on the field with this deck is not that hard. Also, this checks if your opponent uses one, it checks the other immediately, so your opponent needs to use both. And if you then still manage to like go combine creation and then just like attack over both towers, you win. Because if you break Lunalight board, you win. And by the way, Book of Eclipse and Droplet can also stop the Baguska or the SP. But Book of Eclipse not, but Droplet can stop the Baguska and SP. And that's the way. Like you need a decent hand to play through the Lunalight board, especially because of double towers, Baguska, and the spell trap Negate Grave. But it's possible if you play it right, and if your opponent like, if he's not aware of Goddess, you can easily like cheat out a win versus Lunalight. But in general, I think people should be aware if they play Lunalight. And the problem with this matchup is that breakers are not good against a field that cannot be broken with breakers. You know, like you cannot super poly the towers. You can't super poly Baguska plus SP. You can super poly Baguska with anything. What you could do is like normal Sleepy, activate effect. Your opponent goes like sure. And then you just chain Super Poly, use Sleepy and the Baguska for a Mud Dragon, and then if you can still resolve Sleepy, you didn't just go Twin Dragon and like force maybe out an interruption. By the way, do not activate Sleepy if you cannot resolve it, it's cheating. And yeah, for side deck, it's I think pretty simple. You just randomly need Thrust into Floodgate, because when you play Memento, your Vanquish Soul opponent has the 10% of Drawing Shifter will always be like 33%, as if it's like still on 3. I played like a couple of days ago. I played 2 matches. One versus Vanquish Soul, the other one versus, I think it was just Stun, and in 5 games total, I was shifted twice and defissured twice. So shifter is still a card, I guess. So you just need Thrust into a Floodgate. This is Thrust into D-Barrier is good. Like in general, you can go. You can use D-Barrier to call Synchro versus Yami, Fusion versus Draco Tail. Ritual versus Mitsurugi, Xyz versus Ryziel. And this card is just for Vanquishal, especially because the Vanquishal matchup is hard, you need a target for it, and this is probably the best, because the K9 cards alone you can easily handle, because they suck into removal. And yeah, Duster for going second, as well as Kopei for going first. You may be wondering, you got 6 cards for going first, but only 3 Charmies you want to side out. So in general, what I was doing is that of course, you side out the 3 Fuvolos, and you put in the 3 Ash, and then if Thrust is good in the matchup, like if you play against a Breaker deck, you don't side out Thrust, obviously. But if it is good, you just put in Thrust plus the relevant target, and put out something of the Breakers. In this scenario, you can decide what you want to go. If you play against Mitsurugi, for example, or like Ryzie Mitsurugi, you obviously put out the Super Poly because it's bad. But there are a couple of things you need to consider when you're siding out. Super Poly and Book of Eclipse are dodges and extenders. Super Poly with 2 bodies on board, like your normal Anguish, Special Tatsu, they Ash Tatsu. You just chain Super Poly. Or like on Resolution, you can go Super Poly into Twin Dragon. This card is an extender as well. Keep that in mind. As well as Book of Eclipse. Book of Eclipse is probably the best dodge in the deck, especially when you already played through hand traps, and Book of Eclipse can just save your ass when you're playing like through Nip. Your opponent, like, there's one scenario when you summon Sleepy. This is the point, and when you use Sleepy effect, where the opponent will nip you if they have Nip. If not, you just win, because then the other Nip points are just irrelevant. And if you then chain Book of Eclipse, Nibiru will not resolve, all monsters are face down, and he only tributes face up monsters, and Sleepy will resolve because you can't use face down monsters as fusion material. So Book of Eclipse is probably, from non-engine wise, the best dodge, but it all depends. Like, all of these 9 cards handle Izuna, those 6 are extenders, so versus some matchups you can easily just cut out the droplets. And like versus Dracotail, you would easily put out the Super Poly, I think, just because those are the best dodges, and Droplet needs to stop Yarthalion on turn 0, in theory at least. But you can also theoretically put out one of each if you are not sure. It always depends on the moment. You can, in every match, you can put something out different. Like if you play Mitsurugi Ryzen in the one version, you put out the Super Polys, and the Mitsurugi Ryzen in the second version, you put out the Eclipse. But just in case, just that you're not wondering, versus Mitsurugi Ryzen, you definitely leave in the Droplet to secure that Murakumo doesn't break your board immediately. But I personally hope that after a ban list, which will probably, like for me today it's Tuesday, no, Wednesday, sorry. And if you and tomorrow comes the ban list, comes the tin, and after the tin there will probably be the ban list, because there are the Ryzen Malice cards inside. And sorry for all German slipping out sometimes. And then they just made some money with the Ryzen Malice cards, and then they can ban them. So yeah, I guess this is how it will go. I expect it to come like Friday or like in the weekend, and then it will be like present after Monday, I guess. It's just a small prediction. I'm not gonna make a banners prediction, it's like boring. But yeah, that's like probably for the main deck and the side deck for going first at least. Versus Vanquish Soul, you side in those. Versus Yami, you just side in those. You can also side in Thrust, but there's not a good going second Thrust. Like you can side Duster and the Phantasme. And yeah, like that's it. For Dracotail, you put in Ash Blossom, Duster, and Thrust, and then you just put out not Super Poly. I personally would put out Book of Eclipse, and you can always side out some engine. Like going second, this will not be like a full siding patterns. You side out one Darkblade, Field Spell or Horn Dragon, depends on the matchup. Like versus matchups, like versus Yami, you can keep the Field Spell in, Actually, versus Yami, you can probably keep both. Just like one Dark Blade. It always depends on the matchup. It's too specific. Like Horn Dragon, the effect of Horn Dragon will always be dodged. Especially when you're going second, if you use the effect to destroy cards, like versus Yami, they will always dodge it. Vanquish is protection, so you're starting it out as well. So that's the explanation. You need to look for the opponent's deck if they have protection, if they can dodge it easily, if they have spell trap removal. So if not, if there's a deck without spell trap removal, you just side out defeat spell, and you just leave in defeat spell and side out Horn Dragon. But versus Ryze and Mitsurugi, there's Detonator. If you activate defeat spell will be in the graveyard. I don't explain why. So yeah, that's the reasoning for that. Okay, so to sum it up, can Memento still compete during the next format? Probably after a ban list and before that ban list. Depends on when it comes out. I'm gonna be honest, I think it's very, very tough. Even though the Yami matchup and Dracotail is fine. It's not good for you, but it's fine. So it's definitely doable. But as long as Malice is in the format, Malice is still a hard matchup. You need to play very, very perfect to play through the board with breakers and through the hand traps, and then OTK, because Malice is one of the decks you need to OTK. As well as like Rising Mitsu, like Yami, you don't need to OTK because Yami just has no follow-up. Even if they go for follow-up, you have enough. And Dracotail you probably need to kill as well, because this deck can get a bunch of follow-up. Depends on like the game state. If they already set it 2 spells for follow-up, you probably need to OTK, but with Creation King you can just pop these spell traps. So it works. Yeah, like Memento is still gonna be like probably tier 2, at least Rogue, for Justice Hunters format. Post Doom of Dimension, where this card comes out, it can probably be a little bit better because of Super Poly as well. So yeah, but it's not going to be up on the meta as like pre-Allen, post-ban list. There was like 2 weeks format where Memento was the best deck. That's not going to be the case. It's also like after Duelist Advanced release, Memento got a like huge nerf with the Vanquish Soul cards becoming good, because it's a hard matchup. It's really a hard matchup. Doesn't matter how many board breakers you see in your hand. It's still a hard matchup. I'm not gonna lie on that. So I could see Memento still topping like some events, some YCS's regionals, but it's gonna be like 1 or 2 at the most events. Like this deck is not as viable as it was post Allen or before Allen, even like post Supreme Darkness. It's hard, but it's not unplayable. It's just personal decision if you still want to play the deck. I think if you still grind this deck and know exactly what you're doing, you probably have a good time with it, and also you can easily win against some people just because it's Memento. People still don't know what the cards do, so yeah, but which is crazy, by the way. If like we have September 2025 and people still ask me what Memento cards do, so yeah. And the last thing I wanted to talk about: why no hand traps? We are again, what a surprise, in a hand trap format in general. People play breakers, but most people play hand traps, which probably doesn't surprise anyone. I think it will mostly be the case like that in the future as well. Like you need to stop your opponent from playing, because there's no reason to play a deck that's new, that easily like gets thrown up by like Book of Eclipse, Super Poly, or Droplet. Yes, Yami does that, but Yami has hand traps in his hand, so you need to play through the board with breakers and the hand traps, which is possible, of course, but not for every deck. And there are still decks in the format that just are completely unbreakable, like Lunalight, for example, as we talked about. So yeah, the problem with hand traps and Memento is, if you can count, you will count 3, 6, 9, 12, 13. If you count plus 30, 14 non-engine cards in a 41 card deck. If you switch it up to 14 hand traps, like we already had 3 Fuvolos, but if you switch the other 11 cards for hand traps, you have 14 hand traps. And the only deck, probably the only deck that you, or the only decks that you can stop with one, like with 14 hand traps, you will mostly see 1 or 2 at I think that's the highest chance. Like throwing 3 if you play 14 is like good, obviously, but it's not that high of a chance. So you need to play versus decks that lose to 1 or 2 hand traps, and Yami will not do that. Vanquish Soul can throw up to 1 hand trap because the deck is very clunky, I feel like, but Christian Kanan will not do that. Vanquish Soul mostly will not do it, but it can. Draco Tail has consistency issues, so like a Ash Blossom on Rahu or Ketu, if they start with it, can also like throw up the turn, or like a Veiler Imperm on the normal summon can also do that. But if you, for example, you used 1 or 2 hand traps, you stop your opponent, you have 3 cards in hand, you draw a 4th card for turn, you then need to play with those 4 cards through their hand trap and potentially a half board. And if you cut out those cards, in general, you have 9 dodgers going second, and 3, 6, 9, 12, if you count it, 13 extenders, which can still get rough, because you have many normal summons, and as I said, these cards are dodges and extenders at the same time, and board breakers, obviously. Like, you can use Super Poly to break your opponent's board, but you can also use Super Poly to push through your opponent's board by using it as an extender. If you, like, for example, you use Book of Eclipse and there's just like 1 face-up monster left, you cannot Super Poly the board, obviously, but you can use Super Poly as an extender. And you could also discard like clunky cards, like you draw Fuvolos for turn, or you drew Akiron for turn, or like any clunky card like Combined Creation or Horn Dragon. By the way, you can cut Horn Dragon, as I said, and then put a 15th non-engine card like Called by the Grave in the end, because if you play against Draco Tail and you Called by the 5 mana, you just won the match, the game. So I think that's like it in general. Pretty weird that I didn't put the conclusion in the end, but I hope you understand what I tried to tell you, that it's still viable, but not in the top 5 decks, I would say. But yeah, and obviously, keep in mind that Memento is very, it's good versus those hand traps like Veiler, Imperm, which people start playing again, and Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre can hurt, but you can also dodge it with 3, 6, 9, 12 cards. And Veiler you can dodge with 15 cards. So it's okay, but the matchups are like a little bit harder, and that's like to sum it up. I hope you like my explanation. It's pretty long. We are at 28 minutes right now. If you have any questions, just ask me in the comments. If you have any ideas to make this deck better in the format, you can also tell me in the comments. But that's gonna be it. I hope you liked the video. If you do, just don't forget to like and subscribe. And sorry for the late video, by the way. I was going to make 1 or 2 videos at least a week, but I uploaded one Saturday with the same idea of content, but my audio file was just fucking me up. And if you have seen like the video, it was like no voice of me. It was just completely gone. I don't know what happened, but this one worked. So yeah, that's gonna be it. And yeah, I hope I'm gonna make more videos in the future so that you have more things to enjoy, probably. And yeah, see you on the next one. Bye bye.